Well, the great American revolutions, the Revolutionary War, Civil War, and what I call the modern revolution, which extended from about 1929 to about 1975. Now, on the backside of 1929, horses, you know, outdoor plumbing, outhouses, and lots of disease. Um, but more than that is that you know, essentially the idea of all men or all people being created equal had a different meaning than it does now. Um, and so this modern revolution that comes about changes things. Now, obviously, the Revolutionary War, this is where the phrase, we hold these truths to be self evident that all men are created equal, comes from. And it was a radical, radical, radical idea in those days. No barons, no dukes, no nothing like that, no kings, no emperors. And so the Revolutionary War, besides breaking with Britain, was this is breaking with the past in a very serious way. The Civil War, of course, said that one human being cannot enslave another. You know, one person here and another person way down here. You know, the master and the slave. And we said, well, that's not good. In the modern revolution, things changed quite a bit too. Um, and what's helped set it up, what helped create this modern revolution, was that from 1929 to 1953, there was never a moment there was never a moment of stability. My parents were born in 1918, so they were 11 years old when the stock market crashed in 1929. Um, they're going to go for the next 24 years. They're going to have two kids, move back and forth from Pennsylvania to California twice and to Utah once, and they're going to have much of their adult life is going to be spent in this period. And you can imagine that that has a shaping influence. You have depression, you have World War II, one of the great traumatic episodes in human history. You have vast medical changes, and you have vast technological changes. If I took you back to 1919 right now, almost nobody would know how to get around. Nobody would know what to do. Um, so, so it's important to realize that something really significant happened in this time period, uh, and it sets up what happened between 1945 and 1958, which may be the 13 years which are most creative in American history. We're talking about the rise of antibiotics, vaccines. This is when the pill is invented. It's not distributed until 1960, but still. Atomics. Besides atomic bombs, you have atomic energy, atomic reactors. You have all the things that you can do with atomic technology. You have electronics, all kinds of new electronics. I'll just mention one of them, the semiconductor. Certainly, that's a remarkable thing. The whole world, we do with semiconductors, the whole world would come to a screeching halt. Um, Civil rights. Now, this is not the civil rights revolution of the 1960s, but this is where the break with the past occurs, with the Montgomery bus boycott, with Eisenhower sending in troops to enforce integration in Little Rock High School, Brown versus Board of Education. There's a whole variety of things have happened during this time period, which open the door, which make the break, which allow the sets up the stage for the 1960s civil rights revolution. America's place in the world. We were the sole economy that was undamaged, and we became, probably without very much wanting to be, we became the world's policeman. The American political system, 1921. Yeah, You could lead your entire life, and with the exception of the Postal Service, never deal with the United States government. Nowadays, we deal with the United States government almost every day. And if you look at the guarantees on many of the things you purchase, well, they are in some way related to U.S. government standards. Um, it's a huge, huge governmental network. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll leave up to you. And of course, the emergency use culture. People had money. Their kids had money. Kids went out and do what kids do. I sometimes refer to this as the hula hoop generation. I think that's fair. But it's certainly a different generation than had ever existed before. There was kind of a pause in the uh, period of change here. We had conflicts within this hemisphere. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Berlin Wall, Vietnam, all of these things which will set up the potential for change, but are not actually changing themselves. Certainly, the JFK assassination. Again, it's a watershed moment. It occurs late in 1963. Um, I think you could say that for a period of time there was a pause in social evolution. That is, the idea of civil rights didn't go away, but it's not as prominent as it will be before and after this short break. Yeah, and maybe the United States and the world just needed to collect itself for a bit. But by 1964 and through 1969, we have not just crises, but a psychology of crises. What damn thing is going to happen next? The fire and brimstone spread across the land. Cities burned, and riots occurred, and protests in all directions. The country was hardly recognizable. Counterculture, sex, drugs, love, protest, peace, man. Um, it was very different. I suspect that the tolerance level for things grew at a rather fantastic rate. Certainly, too, this is the age of the emergence of feminism and gay rights, particularly feminism, but also gay rights, admittedly, mostly in the cities. This is, of course, the great age of the Civil Rights Revolution. Sadly, this is also the great age of assassinations. Robert Kennedy and Dr. King. And there's an attempt here to use this vast wealth of the United States to form a great society. Essentially, we end up throwing money at problems, and you can make a pretty good case that we didn't do a very good job of it. We tried, but the laws of unexpected consequences evolved, and boy, things got a little strange at times. 1969 and 1975, the temperature of the country drops a little bit here. It's not quite so hot and blazing and flaming as it was in the earlier period, but there's still more fire and brimstone. Cities still burned, and protests still occurred, or riots still occurred. It's just not quite at the level. But we have Watergate, with all that means for trust in America and the American government. We have the loss in Vietnam. We did tell our ally that if they got in trouble, we would come to their aid. We didn't keep that promise. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people flee South Vietnam on boats, rickety, stickety boats, almost anything to get away from the unrushing communists from North Vietnam. But nevertheless, in losing Vietnam, the American people, just as with Watergate, essentially had a feeling of impotence. And certainly our military is going to be very reluctant to take a chance on another loss. Some people have called this American suicide attempt, and I kind of agree with that. It was in the long run the a great sit time for doing away with certain distinctions between people. You know, it was a time in which, of course, what was thought to be artificial barriers to women and to people with different sexual practices and what have you. Um, more tolerant of drugs, things like that. All of this, of course, changes, and people become less likely to encounter hostility, and the whole fabric of society changes. But at the same time, the cost of this period of change, well, in terms of republicanism, in terms of the equality of all people, at least before the law, and in terms of opportunity, well, all of this changed. Um, it is really a period of time in which the cost, if you look at Vietnam, if you look at the assassinations, if you look at the cities in ruins, and the results, you know, far greater equality for all, far greater freedom and opportunity for all. It's a hard period to grasp. I don't think we would want to give back the freedoms and the equality which we have at this time. But boy, paid a hell of a price to get here. And I'd like to think that it was worth it. I'd also like to think that we didn't need to go through all of this. Um, I don't know if the country has ever recovered. Look at the negative side of things from this period. It's chaos and distraction, wars and depressions and all that. But I also like to think that we gained a great deal to it. And hopefully the two of them, those two issues, um, balance each other out. Well, as I like to say, everybody stay healthy out there. And, you know, I look forward to, I hope we meet again sometime or someplace. Take care. Bye bye.